Hello, this is Teresa Litchfield. I'm really glad you're here today. I created this video for all of you that fear watercolor and think it's just too hard, and also I wanted to share some of my ideas. I love this set from Coloradocraftco and thought it was a really perfect image to watercolor, and I also wanted to share how easy it is to create the background. I love sunflowers, and I made this card a few weeks ago for PAPERTREY ink, and I used Distress Oxide ink and a small blending brush for the background on this card, and I did it in a very similar way. This is a slimline card that I made a couple years ago, and I also watercolored the background on this one, and I have a video that I'll link to in the description here. I'm by no means an expert on watercolor, but I thought I would share some of the things I've learned and some easy techniques to feel more confident with it. So here's a look at the big and bold Ukraine sunflower with that gorgeous flower. And there's a die that cuts the whole thing out. There's also a die that cuts out the sentiment there on the bottom, and that's the one I'm going to use today. I usually like to watercolor on a bigger panel than I might use, so this is a 5x7 size, and the paper I reach for most often is Fabriano Artistico Extra White, and I'm going to use the hot press paper today, which is more smooth on this card. I placed that stamp in my MISTI, and I'll stamp that with Obsidian Black Pigment ink, and I'll do that a couple times, really to get a good impression. You really have to press down on the watercolor paper, and I find I like to do that a couple times. And then I'll heat set that with a clear embossing powder. I use a pigment ink so that the ink won't run when you apply water to it, and the heat embossing gives a really nice crisp outline and a well so the watercolor doesn't go outside of the image. The next thing, I like to tape it onto a hardboard, and I like to use the Scotch delicate surface painter's tape to do that with. There's a lot of different ones you could choose. I'm going to work with my new Daniel Smith watercolors I just got. I feel like a little kid in the candy store. I pulled out a few here that work good with the sunflower, and I'm also going to use a porcelain palette and a water bottle to add water to that. I've got 2 cups of clean water, and then my brushes, I just got some new brushes from Wonder Forest, and my friend Amber Rain Davis told me about these, and I'm really liking them, and they'll be in the description below too. I thought I would show the swatch chart I made. I got a dot chart that shows has all the colors from Daniel Smith, and so I made my own swatch chart, and each time I get a color I just mark it with a little dot by the side of the color. I just made some grids on watercolor paper and then applied all the colors to that and left a space to write them, and I used the clear kitchen cutting mats on the outside of that. I'm going to start with Cadmium Yellow Medium Hue, and I'm just going to take it right out of the tube. I haven't put these into palettes yet and dried them out, and that's okay. You can use them right out of the tube. I'll add some water to the paint and just make it the strength I want it to be, and then I'll add that, and I'm using a size 6 round brush, and I'll add it to that watercolor paper dry. On this one I decided to do that. Sometimes I'll put water all over the area and then drop the color in, but this time I'm just gonna use it on dry paper, and then I'll come in with clear water and pull it down and to make it a lot lighter. So I've gone around the whole flower next to that center, and then I'll come in, I'll clean my brush out, and then I'll come in with clean clear water, and that's why I want 2 cups of water. One for cleaning a brush out and one for clean water. And I'll come in with the clean water and I'll pull that color down. I let it dry a little bit, but then when you pull it down, it does make it a lot lighter. And therefore you've got 2 different values of the same color of paint, so your lighter one looks more like a highlight. I'll again go around the whole flower and do this, and that'll be my base color, and then I can start adding other colors of paint. I'm going to let that dry now and go to the leaves, and I'll start out by using sap green, and I'll put a little dot of that on my palette, add water to it, And then I'll start by adding color to where those shaded areas would be on the leaves and the stem. I start adding a little bit more of a watered down portion of the paint to the leaves, and just add a wash of color to both of them. As the paint dries, I can go back and forth between the leaves and add a little more color on top of them. You really want to wait for them to dry to do that, and that's what helps build up the color. Sometimes when it's still wet, I love to play and just drop in the color and just kind of see where it's going to spread to. I'm going to add some new Gamboge and some Van Dyke Brown to my palette there, and I'm going to leave a space in between because I want to be able to mix them. So I often do that so I can make a third color out of two colors. I'm also a hairstylist, and I most often do this with my clients to be able to customize their hair color for them. I mix those two to get a gold, and now I'm going to lay down a whole bunch of clean clear water, and I'll just drop in the color and I'll saturate the whole entire center with that gold. There's a lot less control with this technique, but it's really fun just to watch it where it's going to go. As it dries, I'll just add some more in there and darken it up a bit. As the center is drying, I'm going to take some of the new Gamboge and I'm going to put it just on the petals, right where it meets the center, and darken that area up. One great thing about watercolor is if you feel like you've gotten too much in an area, just take a paper towel and just dab off the color. And it comes right off. It's really very forgiving. There really hasn't been a time when I made a mistake that I feel like I haven't been able to fix it. It just takes a little bit of patience and practice. I did the same with this layer of color, and I just took some clean clear water on my brush and pulled it down to where I wanted some depth on those petals. I'll switch back to the center now to let the petals dry, and using the Van Dyke Brown, I'll just add some color in a dotting motion around that rim, and I do that all the way around that, and that really darkens it up. I'll move to the very center and use the same Van Dyke Brown and do the same thing in that dotting motion. And the reason I do the dotting motion is because I can come in with a different color and kind of fill in where the dots are, and it allows you to not to mix the color, but to kind of add some difference of color. I'm adding some Serpentine green to my palette, and that's just got a lot of yellow in it compared to the sap green. So I'm going to add this onto my leaves in the darker areas. Everything in nature has varying degrees of color, so I really like using different temperatures, whether it be a cool or a warm color, and I like using them together, and it makes it look more realistic. I keep applying the Serpentine green to the areas of the leaf, like on the veins. I really want those to show up and really accentuate those. So I keep doing that and just adding layer on top of layer as it dries. And then I come in and start using the sap green again, so everything doesn't get to be the same tone of color. I'll let the leaves dry for a bit while I go back to the center, and I start adding some of the new Gamboge with that pointillism technique. And by the way, that's the term for it, and it was really created by a famous French painter in the 19th century, Georges Seurat, and you might remember his famous painting Sunday Afternoon. And I really like it. It just allows you to give different color to the same part of that image. I start filling in that area in between with the new Gamboge, the gold I made, and the Van Dyke Brown. And between them, I just am leaving space open so you can kind of see the highlights through it. But that's really a fun way to do that, and like I said, add more color to it. I'll really often, I will get a picture off of Google and I'll look at that kind of to see what I need to do as far as color goes. I'm going to switch here to a number 2 round brush, and I'm going to take that gold that I made. I added a little more Van Dyke Brown to it, and I'm going to take that because it's a really fine brush, and I'm just going to add a little bit of depth onto those petals, which is right next to the center. Adding more shade and highlights really gives more dimension and lifelike look to it, and it really makes it stand out more. To finish it off, I'm going to take the same color and the number 2 brush and add some splatters to it. So now I'm going to remove that from the hardboard, and I'm saving the tape. I'm going to take another panel of 5x7 of the same watercolor paper and reuse that tape, and this is going to be my background. I'm going to add a little bit of cobalt blue and also cobalt teal blue to my palette. I've already got some white titanium white on there, and I'm going to end up mixing that with the blues to kind of get the hue I want. I added a little bit of the cobalt blue to the white just so it wasn't pure white. It was a little more of a grayish blue. And then I start using that blue and kind of going back and forth, and I rinse my brush off a lot in between that. I think this is what I find so fun about watercolor and paint in general, is that you can make your own colors. You can take a few colors and make a custom color of your own, and you don't have to buy the whole palette that's made. So I'm going to take my number 6 brush again, the 6 round brush, and I'm going to just kind of start stippling my sky on the back. And I'm using that center color that was the cobalt teal, and I've mixed a whole bunch of white and a little bit of that cobalt blue in there. So that's my lightest color, and like I said, I'm leaving some white space in there too. I'm going to come in later with some different colors and actually add some clouds. So I'm going to let that dry for a bit, and then I'll add some more of that same color over the top of it, and it just darkens it up a bit. I'm just going to kind of establish what I've already done. I'm going to darken up my lightest blue with a little bit more of that cobalt blue, and like I said, it's got a lot of white in it. But I'm going to darken that up, and then so I'm going to add some more depth and just start stippling around that and add some darkness at the top of the sky. I've left a lot of the footage in here of this just because I want you to be able to see kind of what I've done. And so I'm just going to let you watch here for a second. I feel like my sky needs a little more depth, so I'm going to add some indigo blue to that center color. I kind of liked how that center color ended up, and so this is just going to darken that up a bit. And I'm only going to add this to mostly the very top of that sky. I'm starting out in the corners of the top of that, and I'm just really being random and leaving a lot of open space. I'm not putting the dark blue all over everything. I'm letting some of that light shine through. With each one of the colors, I'm leaving that space open, so I'm creating the illusion of clouds. And then I'm going to come in with the titanium white and actually add some white in there. So you'll kind of see as I go along that I leave space. And here I'm just dabbing off a little bit of that because it was pulling in the corners, and that often happens. And now I'm going to use that white. So remember, I added some blue to the white, so it wasn't so stark. And I'm just stippling again where I think the white should be for the clouds. As the white dries, it really fades out, so I'm going to just kind of reinforce it by going over it again each time. And you could actually add some white gouache to it, and it's a little bit more opaque, and the white would stay a lot more bright. If you're not sure what gouache is, it's a watercolor, but it's definitely opaque compared to watercolor. And I often use white or black gouache when I want to do splatters on something, because it really stays really opaque and true to its color. So I'm going to let that dry now and start on the field of sunflowers. And so I'm going to start this in rows with the serpentine green, and I'm just doing flicking motions to kind of mimic a field of sunflowers. And so I'm going to start at the very top and the shortest ones, and as I go down they'll get a little bit taller, just like as if you were standing in a field. But yeah, I'm just gonna make lines on there and rows of them. So I think I actually make 3 rows of lines on this. I came up with this idea when I really just want to have more of an organic background and just to kind of create the scene, especially for sunflowers. Plus, it's just a nice, easy technique and a good way to get some practice in with your watercolor and just see how it works. I often think the best things happen by accident. We're really not thinking about it and you're just letting loose. I let that dry a little bit and then I went back over it with the same color and I'm going back in between the rows just to kind of offset things and so it doesn't look like they are particular straight rows. Again, I let that dry and then I added some more sap green to my palette and I'm going to start adding that to the field. And remember, that's a different temperature. It's a cooler green and so it's going to start to really make that field come to life. As you keep going, it really does start to look like a field and it's really fun and relaxing too. I really enjoy watercoloring a lot, especially when you see the end result. I'm going to add my little sunflowers in the distance now. So I start by adding that cadmium yellow medium hue, just in little, kind of little patches, little dots of it. And then I'll come in with the new Gamboge and add a little bit more darkness to them. And then I'm going to come in with that that gold color that I mixed with the new Gamboge and the Van Dyke brown. And it's really watered down. I would just want it to be really light and kind of look like shadows. When I was happy with how the field was turning out, I covered up the sky with my hand and I took the Serpentine green and I'm going to add some flicking of that to the field. I set that aside to dry and I'll cut my sunflower out and you can kind of see what it's going to end up looking like. I stamped the sentiment on the same watercolor paper and I'll cut that out with the die. I really liked how the background turned out as a 5x7, but I decided to cut it down to a A2 size and I'm going to back it onto a dark indigo cardstock. And so I just glue that on there and then I'm going to take the sunflower and I'll add that a whole bunch of foam tape onto that. So and it's going to just hang off the side a bit. And I added also some foam tape onto the left side of the sentiment. So you'll kind of see as I put it on here, it's just going to hang off on that right side and then this sentiment's going to overlap it. I thought the background really turned out to make a nice scene for the sunflower. I really loved how it turned out and I took some of the stamps from the set and stamped on the inside of it too. No matter what watercolor you have, I hope you practice and it's just fun to play and really get used to how the watercolor works. And remember, you don't have to buy all the colors that are made. You can just buy the colors on the color roll. You could really start out with just the primary colors. I hope you enjoyed the video and you thought it was helpful. I really want you to feel more comfortable and that was my purpose in making the video. I have all the supplies listed in the description below and here's also a couple other videos you might enjoy. Thank you so much for watching and I really hope you have a great day doing something you love.